Hello there, and welcome to Better Than This. This is a show for ambitious humans who are tired of the status quo playbook and are looking for something better. My name is Megan French Dunbar, and I've spent the last decade exploring what it would take to improve work for everyone, to discover whether or not it's possible to succeed in business without being forced to sacrifice ourselves, without the chronic stress, the burnout, guilt, overwhelm, the anxiety. Good news, it is. As an author, entrepreneur, journalist, and resident instigator, I've interviewed over 1,000 extraordinary business leaders who've achieved success by throwing the old playbook out the window and doing everything differently. What's even better is that this new playbook improves your performance, your workplace, and your life. If you're ready to admit that the way we're working isn't working and are looking for something better than this, you're in the right place. Let's get started. So today's episode, we're going to do the whole do as I say, not as I do situation, because it's inspired by me making a big old mistake based on something that I regularly talk about, which is authentic leadership. So many, many months ago, I had a professional consultant come in, kind of audit my online persona, and was like, you need to drastically update your personal website. It's not professional enough. Here's a whole bunch of examples of all these fancy big name authors that you should try to emulate. And I was like, okay, I will do this. I want to be a big fancy name, big name author. I'm going to do all the things that all these incredible authors are doing who, P.S., they're not actually probably doing any of the things on their website. There's an entire team behind them, but regardless, I am just going to DIY it. I'm going to come up with my brand promises and my taglines and my buzzwords, and I'm going to try to design it and put it on the back end, and I'm just going to make the best website humanly possible based on the script of here's exactly the mold that you need to jam your personal website into in order to be considered a professional author. And so I have, for the last 6 months, gone through, I'm just conservatively 100 versions of my website, just changing out the taglines and all the things, and they never feel right. I'll settle on something for one day, and the next day I just wake up and I'm like, I hate it. It's awful. It's garbage. And it finally dawned on me, literally last week, what was going on, which is like flipping to my own playbook. I had completely abandoned my own authentic viewpoint. Because I'm not a marketing person, I'm not a website person, and I felt uncomfortable doing this entire professionalization of my website, instead of looking inward and being like, what would I want to say? What is uniquely mine to say here? What is the authentic version of this for me? I 100% just took the old playbook of, okay, here's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to try to force myself into this, even though it doesn't feel right. And that, and in fact, didn't work. Surprising, probably nobody. So as I looked at this today, I was like, we gotta go into the authentic leadership conversation, because it is not just about wasting hours and hours trying to make a website cool. It is about how you show up every day at work, which impacts everyone around you and impacts your own mental health and well-being as well. Why? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get into what even is authentic leadership. It's something that comes up a lot. I think it's kind of like buzzwordy-ish, but there's not a particular definition. We're going to talk about 3 very specific mindset shifts and practices that you can do to cultivate more authentic leadership in your life. And we're going to investigate why authentic leadership is such a powerful tool, both in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So to start us off, we're going to go just another story, just story after story today. I'm full of them. So 2017, I'm invited to speak on an island off the coast of Canada. I literally have to fly to Vancouver, and then I have to get on a float plane and fly to Cortes Island in the middle of effing nowhere and get off my little float plane. And I'm on this adorable little island surrounded by these gorgeous mountains and the ocean and the whole thing at Hollyhock Leadership Institute, going for Social Venture Institute, where I'm speaking. And I arrive. I don't know a single soul there. There's probably 100 people at this conference. And our beginning of the conference is starting. We're all outside on this gorgeous lawn and underneath these gorgeous trees. And I feel like a middle school person at lunch who has no one to sit with and is just like sitting at my table looking around, hoping that I'll see a friendly face. And I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm awkward. And so I'm like looking for social cues for everyone else. Like, how do I act in this situation? I don't know what to do with my arms. And out of nowhere, I hear someone begin singing Nina Simone's song, Feeling Good. And I would pretend to sing it right now, but it would just be the worst. I can't do it. But this gorgeous voice is like singing about birds flying high, and you know how I feel. And I'm like, what is going on? And this woman walks down the path, and she's wearing this like flowy silk dress. She has this pompadour-esque mohawk hairdo, big gold earrings, Birkenstocks, and she's just belting out this song. And I'm like, who is this queen? I'm obsessed immediately. And like, great performer, like, let's get to the quote professional stuff. So the woman stops singing and she introduces herself and she says, I'm Jocelyn McDougall and I will be your host and facilitator for the conference over the next 3 days. And there was a part of me that was looking around like, oh my gosh, this poor woman. Doesn't she know that this is a business conference? Like, what is she doing up there? Look at all of us professional humans out here. Why is she, she's singing, she's wearing Birkenstocks and the earrings, and she's got this whole persona, like she's just going to get eaten alive because she's so different, right? This is the old playbook, very buttoned up, insecure version of me that's having these thoughts. And I watch over the next 3 days, and I'm going to be confident enough to speak for 100 people when I say every single human being at that conference fell madly in love with Jocelyn McDougall. She was the best facilitator I had ever seen in my life. She held challenging conversations with grace and levity. There was so much humor in the space. Everyone felt like encouraged to be a braver, brighter version of themselves as a result of her being our host and facilitator. And on the last day, I was so inspired by her to be braver and brighter myself that she describes what I did as super friending. And it's not far from the truth. At lunch, I approached her. I was like, I'm leaving this afternoon. It's now or never. I'm gonna take my shot. And I walk up to Jocelyn and I introduce myself and I say, I think we're supposed to be friends for the rest of our lives. Like, playing it cool, Megan, just nailed it. And she very gracefully, because she's delightful, like, doesn't immediately reject me and is like, yeah, sure, like, let's exchange numbers or whatever. And later that year, we Skype call because 2017, and she's in Canada, I'm in Boulder, and like, we kind of hit it off, but it's like kind of hard to build a friendship over Skype with someone that you don't really know. But like, at this point, I feel like I know her, but she has no idea who I am. Later that year, I have this idea for this big women's conference, and she pops into my head, and I'm like, I'm going to call that woman Jocelyn and see if she wants to come down and co-host this thing with me. And she does. And thus begins a lifelong friendship. I was not wrong when I told her we were meant to be best friends for the rest of our lives. We have, in fact, become that. And we've worked together for the last 8 years, putting on tons of conferences around the country, hundreds and hundreds of people coming to these. We do small workshops. I'm literally leaving next week to go do one at Coach and Kate Spade with her, with their women's employee resource group. We, in fact, have sealed the bond. And it all started at this place in Hollyhock where I watched her show up as her full, authentic self. So why does this matter? Because this, for me, she was the embodiment of why authentic leadership works. Why showing up as gorgeous and as large as you want to in your own skin as your own self, speaking from your own truth and being yourself absolutely sets you apart in a leadership context and in professional settings. Jocelyn endeared herself to the entire community and was literally booked time and time again by a ton of people who were there. It became this huge professional opportunity for her because she just showed up as herself. So we're going to talk about why that is and also why it feels so hard to do that. And we'll kick this off by talking about what authentic leadership actually is. And for me, I think I used to have a bit of I guess I would say a shallow version of what authentic leadership meant to me. It was basically someone who was brave enough to show up at the office wearing whatever they want and said whatever they want. And while that can be a part of authentic leadership really just means leading from a place that is true to who you are. But what I identified as I looked and talked to many, many authentic leaders and looked at the research around this is it's operating and leading as you are, but as your highest and best self. It is going down into your deeper values, your deeper truth, that inner wisdom, challenging the status quo, having emotional regulation. There's a lot of components that pull together to make someone a genuinely authentic leader. And I think the thing that I didn't understand about this was that it's something that can be honed over time and it can be stepped into gradually. And when I talked to Jocelyn about her authentic leadership journey, when you meet her nowadays, you would just imagine that she came out of the womb like this. And she told me that was 100% not the case. In her earlier career, in her early 20s, she said she used to wear the kitten heels and the power suit and show up as a very polished version of herself that felt like she had to conform in certain ways in order to be accepted in the professional community. But she said she noticed later in her 20s, early 30s, that the more she would kind of dial up her authentic leadership and speak her truth and show up in an authentic way that was truer to herself, that she kept getting a positive response and positive feedback, and it was starting to set her apart in certain ways. And she said she essentially just took the dial and kept gradually dialing it up further and further until she got to the point where she was, in fact, truly authentic at all times. And this is something, one, that was a good point for me to understand, was that it doesn't have to be an overnight flip the switch, because I'm still contending with this 8 years later as I'm stepping into my own authentic leadership. And the other part of this that is really critical to point out is that there's no part of me that is saying or shaming anyone who cannot show up in their full authentic leadership right now, especially if you're at a workplace where you don't feel safe, where you don't feel included, where you feel as though your job security might be on the line, where there's management issues, where you have someone who doesn't accept you for who you are. When we're talking about authentic leadership in the workplace, one of the key things that we oftentimes overlook is how scary this can be, because it is tied to our livelihoods and our financial stability and oftentimes kind of our sense of self-worth. And so if you're feeling that fear around I can't do this for any reason, that is very real and 100% valid. And there are areas where you can begin to just gently dial it up. One leader I talked to, she talked about the 2% rule of just trying to get 2% better at something every week or every month, instead of it having to be this huge black and white thing where it's a gradual progression that you lean gently into something and see how people respond instead of just showing up the next day as an entirely different person. And this is one of the elements that when we talk about bringing your whole self to work, not all workspaces are safe to do so. And that is hard enough as it is to feel like you constantly aren't enough and you have to change yourself for your workplace. So that is heavy. Acknowledge that. And if you can't step into your full authentic leadership right now, there is no shame. There is zero shame. But when I talk about the beauty of authentic leadership, let's start here. So I'm wondering, for you, have you ever been around someone in a professional setting who you have felt is like Jocelyn? Who is your Jocelyn? A leader who shows up just wholly authentically, where it doesn't matter the room that they're in. They do not deviate. They don't change. They're not wearing a mask. They show up. They speak their truth. They are very much themselves. How do you feel when you are around these people? What do they make you think? What do they make you feel about yourself? For me, I was inspired after meeting Jocelyn when I left that conference to lean into my own authentic leadership a bit more and a bit more and a bit more until I got to the place where it became more of the thing that I did was the norm rather than the exception. I would say the vast majority of the spaces that I show up in at this point, I feel very confident in my full authentic self, and I am still working on it because it's really effing hard. And this is especially true for women. So we're going to talk about why that is. And if you had listened to the previous episode, I think it was episode 2, talking about why women are struggling more in the workplace than men, one of the dynamics that I talked about was the fact that business, as a social construct that we've created, has been around for a few thousand years. And it's only been in the last 50 years or so that women have come in any sort of significant way where we've been elevated into starting to get into leadership roles, meaning that men have shaped and led the business world for nearly the entire time it's been around, which is thousands and thousands of years. And we are just getting our little foothold in, meaning when women started coming into the workplace in earnest in 1970s, we were, in fact, the minority population coming into a dominant culture. White, straight, male, able-bodied. Like, that is the dominant culture in business, and it still is to this day. When you have a minority identity and you're coming into a dominant culture like this, it's one of the more obvious examples is immigrants. When you immigrate to a new country, you try to adopt the cultural norms in hopes that you'll be accepted into the new community that you're moving into. The same is true for women and other people with marginalized identities who've come into the workplace. We feel like we have to adopt the cultural norms of the business community in order to succeed. We have to dress more masculinely. We have to have masculine traits coming out of the wazoo. We can't show emotion. There's this anti-femininity just rampant in the business world. And that is what we have to essentially embody as we go into the business world. This was very much true for the older generations, the women who are now in their 60s and 70s, who were the pioneers and oftentimes the first women in their office or their industry or their role, where everyone is scrutinizing them. They have to take on every single element of the masculine identity of the workplace and the norms and the cultural aspects in the business community. And anytime they step even a little bit out of line, they get pounced on, right? They're under this microscope. They have to prove themselves over and over and over again to the point where they have to over-assimilate and kind of take on the masculine qualities above and beyond what even some of the men do. And they do all of this in the name of being accepted. And we are still doing this to this day. I still remember heading to my first CEO conference in 2016, and it was like 80% male CEOs, and running to Marshall's in advance to get a freaking power suit that I found in the juniors section. And it was this like chintzy, I can like still feel the fabric on my body. It was like a sausage casing with like peplum. Oh my God. Anyway, I digress. It was the worst. But in my brain, I was like, must wear power suit, even though can't afford it. And it looks like garbage, going to put high heels on, even though I've had 3 knee surgeries. If I have any chance of succeeding or being accepted or being included, I have to show up like that, not like me. This situation is not going to be included. I have to become someone else in order to be included in any way. And here's other examples of women feeling this way. Stephanie Nadi Olson told me about hers.
I think I have bended and flexed and thwarted myself into all sorts of knots and shapes to try to conform and assimilate in the business world. And I think It starts with stories I actually started collecting from business people when I was a kid. And realizing, the difference between me and those people and figuring out like what did I need to be successful. And I started trying to be like these people that were not who I am and where I come from and how I look and how I was raised. And so it's been a lifelong journey for me of trying to assimilate and figure out how to fit in business. I think um pretending I don't have children is like a big one. Like,
Ooh.
you know, giving birth and becoming fundamentally changed in terms of who I am and how I view the world and needing to show up in the work and at work as if none of that is happening is a really big one because I didn't want to be penalized. I didn't want people to expect less from me and then manifest that by giving me less responsibility or including me less because I was a mom. And so just trying to hide that really important part of my identity. I think another one that I've been talking about recently is just trying to hide the fact that I'm raised Muslim and I'm Palestinian is a really big one because there aren't many of us. And I'm really fortunate that I'm white presenting and have been able to get through life with a name like Stephanie without people digging in too much to my heritage. And but I've like purposefully kept it quiet and not been honest in a lot of ways about who I am until more recently, once I felt like I had the power to not give a shit.
And here's like the really hard part about this is that we feel like we have to assimilate in order to be included, and belonging is one of our core human needs. This was, again, in The Myth of Normal. This is a book that I will probably reference for years and years to come. Dr. Gabor Mate and Daniel Mate wrote this together, and they're talking about we have two inherent core human needs. One of them is belonging. This is that sense of survival all the way back from our like hunter-gatherer, you don't want to be kicked out of the tribe, otherwise you will starve situation. We need to feel included. We're a social being. It's a core need of ours for belonging. And so when you're heading into a workplace where there's all these cultural norms that have already been established, you feel like you have to just suck it up and become that picture of what everyone else is doing so that you can belong, which is a core human need. It also is how you feel like you're going to succeed. The stakes are very high. This is your livelihood, your career, your success that you're talking about. And so you convince yourself that you have to be a certain way. There's a lot of reasons that we do this that are very understandable. And it's making us miserable. It's making us so freaking miserable. And there are reasons why. Again, from The Myth of Normal, the Mates found that one of the core predictors of disease on planet Earth is excessive concern about social acceptability, which is constantly what women in the workplace are feeling and just what women are feeling in general in society. We're constantly being judged from every angle, right? And then in the workplace, we're held to higher standards. We're judged more harshly. We have to prove our competence until kind of proven otherwise. And it is exhausting to just constantly be worried about what other people are thinking. But then the Mates also found that the second core human need that we have is expressing our individuality, being our authentic self. And so when we get into the workplace where we feel like we have to change ourselves in order to belong, core human need number one, but our other core human need is to be authentic, they're in direct contrast with each other. They are butting heads constantly, and it feels like this perpetual lose-lose. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. One of them's going to have to suffer. And so we almost always kind of err toward the side of the belonging because we have the narrative that it's the way that everyone else is doing it. It's the way that we have to succeed. We don't want to lose our jobs. We don't want to put our career in jeopardy. And so we suppress our authenticity. This is also one of the 6 key predictors of burnout is feeling out of alignment with your values, feeling out of alignment with who you are. It leads to burnout. It leads to disease. It stresses us out to constantly be putting on that mask to be heading into the workplace feeling like we're not enough as we are, that we are not good enough. We have to change in order to be accepted. And then when we do, here's the even more effed up part. So many times we're still not even accepted. We bend and thwart and change and mold ourselves to fit into this place in order to succeed. And then there's still the good old boys club where we're still not even accepted, even though we're trying our hardest in the circumstances where you have completely changed who you are to be accepted and you do feel included. It's not actually true inclusion because they're not including the real you. They're, in fact, including the faux version of you who is not a real entity. So, the answer: authentic leadership, which is so much easier said than done. And like I said, I am still a work in progress. I have literally studied this stuff for years and written about it. And I just got sucked into the comparison vortex and popped out 6 months later and was like, oh yeah, I just did it again. Assimilated right on in with the best of them. And as I am experiencing now, the practice is to just begin again, be compassionate with yourself, and invite yourself to just re-step into that authenticity as soon as you realize that you have fallen off. So we're going to talk about 3 specific practices or mindset shifts that I identified. This is talking to all of the people that I have interviewed in my career and then looking at the research on authentic leadership as to what we can do to cultivate authentic leadership and why. So the current research on authentic leadership, yes, I have my kind of anecdotal, I like Jocelyn and she was the best, and this time I messed up my website. And the research continues to show over and over and over again that authentic leadership is 100% a more effective approach. Authentic leaders, they actually have been shown that anyone working with them has more positive emotional response as a result of being around any sort of authentic leadership. This is what I experienced around Jocelyn, and so many of the other attendees did, where you're watching someone be fully authentic and you begin to feel this genuine positive feeling of just you feel better being around them. But these positive emotions, when workers feel them, it in fact inspires them to be more creative, and it inspires them to try to be a better version of themselves. This is just beautiful. Research also shows that authentic leadership reinforces workers' emotional connection with their organization, which improves trust and loyalty. It's actually a way to engender more employee retention is authentic leadership. People feel better around these leaders and they feel better about the organizations that they work for. So that's the impact that your authentic leadership can have on others around you. The impact that it has on yourself is incredible. Think about the times when you are around people in your life, friends, family, whoever they might be, the people who you just get to be your entire full self with. Those are the moments of your life where you just light up. It feels comfortable. You feel aligned with your values. You feel happy. You feel accepted because you are, in fact, just being your full authentic self, and these people love you for it. And it feels incredible. That doesn't have to just be relegated to a few people around you who you see once or twice a year on a friend's trip. It can be an everyday occurrence, bringing it into the workplace and being accepted for who you are in your full entire self. Not having to put a mask on, not having to pretend to be anyone that you aren't, being able to speak your truth and lead from your values. It feels so much better. You feel more aligned and more resonant as a person by being able to show up this way. When I talk about the mindset shifts, we're going to talk about the old playbook frame of mind and the new playbook frame of mind. So mindset shift number 1 is in fact going to be the old playbook tells us that we are supposed to look to others to cue us in on how we're supposed to behave. We're supposed to take our social cues and look to norms and behaviors of people around us, and that is supposed to inform exactly how we show up. The new playbook, your better than this practice, is in fact to look to your values to inform how you want to show up and how you are to behave. And this is one of those things, for me at least, this might not be true for you, but it used to be when people would talk about values, I was like, yeah, I know my values. But if you had asked me, okay, write down what are your values? Like, name them for me right off the top of your head. I would have been like, family? Like, I didn't really know them. I had some conception of what they might be in my head, but I couldn't articulate them. And this was until my friend Nathan Havey asked me about this at some point, probably in 2018, 2019. We did one where we were identifying the values for my company. And then he said, I want you all to take this exercise we did here and take it home and identify your personal values as well. I went home, I identified my values, and I will pull my piece of paper. I keep mine right here by my desk inside of a beautiful little flower that my son Jack wrote for me. Mine are impact, exploration, love, joy, and authenticity. I have 5. I recommend 5 for everyone as well. If you right now at this point are like, I don't know what my values are, what am I supposed to do here? I'm going to be like, cool. I have like a worksheet and some stuff you can do that is on the website that can help you actually sit down and do the homework that Nathan made me do. That is based off the exercise that he did, where you can articulate your values and then come back up to here's what we're going to do with them. So with your values, Jocelyn and I got brought in to do a women's executive leadership workshop, a multi-day one a few years ago. And this was at the company in the Midwest, plastics manufacturing. And we were talking about values in this context. And I had, out of nowhere, this like bonkers visual came into my head. Someone was asking me about like, why are we talking about values? And so the visual that came to mind for me was that each of us is like one of these flailing windsock people that's outside of the used car lot, going all over the place. And the wind is all of the pressure and the social expectations and the challenges and the work and all the things that we have in our lives is constantly blowing us all the F around. And your sandbags, the things that are tied to the bottom of your little personal windsock, are in fact your values. They are what hold you to the ground and make it so that the prevailing winds, which are oftentimes very fierce, do not take you and whip you around and to the point where you can't function. You hold on to your values. They are what keep you grounded. And so what does that look like? So this is one of the practices that I've been building in to my work over the last few years, and it is one thing that I've seen many, many of the leaders that I've talked to do as well. So a very just simple example is you're heading into a meeting. If I'm heading into a room with people who have a lot more experience than me or a different background or have like some sort of expertise that I don't, there's all sorts of reasons for me to second guess my own value and be concerned about what I am going to say and how I'm going to be received and what I should talk about and all the things. Taking a deep breath, reviewing your values, and thinking about them through the lens of how would my values, if I'm rooted into my values right now, how would they dictate I should show up to this? So I'll take this into an actual real world example that happened to me. I was at a conference a couple of years ago, sat down at a table where there were 6 men at the table, all of them in their 60s and 70s, and all of them knew each other. They'd all been on a board together. I sit down and I'm looking around. I'm like, oh, sweet. You're like, I don't even, like insecurities all over the place. And I was like, I don't even know. I almost just picked up my plate and left, which would have been very awkward because I knew some of these guys. And I'm sitting there very quiet because I feel like I don't have anything to add and they all know each other already. And they're like more, quote, successful than I am. And I'm starting to just get to the point where I'm like, I'm just going to eat my veggie burger here and not say a word for the entire hour that I'm sitting at the table. Deep breath, Megan. I reviewed my values. What could my values inspire here? And I was like, okay, thinking about joy and love and being curious from this place of exploration, I'm going to lob a question in, inspired by my values. And so I said to these men in a lull in the conversation, could each of you tell me about a moment in the last year that was just your most joyful moment that you had? Was like one of the happiest things that's happened to you in the last year? And then I was like, oh, geez, like what did I just do? And a few seconds later, one of them answered my question and told me all about his daughter's wedding that he had just been to. And then another one jumps in and is talking to me about his wife and this like incredible trip that they'd been on. And all of a sudden, all of them are starting to talk to me about what are the most beautiful and meaningful moments of their life from the last year. And it just cracked all of us open. And instead of me being like shoving my face with my veggie burger and just being silent for an hour, instead, by rooting into my values, I inspired us all to have a really gorgeous conversation that also helped me connect with these men in a different way. And so this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about, one, knowing what your values are and having them easily, like in a place where you know, if you can't name them off the top of your head, write them down. Kathy Bullhouse, CEO of Charter Next Generation, after we did this exercise with her, she keeps hers on her phone. And last time I saw her, she showed me her values on her phone. My friend Ayla Schlosser, she keeps hers on a spreadsheet on her desktop that she in fact references every Friday and looks at to see if she had any moments of values misalignment throughout the week. Spreadsheets, phone, sticky notes, whatever you need, have some sort of little artifact where you can refer back to your values and use them as a way to make decisions, inform how you want to show up. Just reference them and regularly come back to them. And it is a beautiful way to root in to your authenticity, because your values, truly, they are your non-negotiables. They're the way in which you want to show up in the world. One of the better ways to think about what your values might be is, how do you want people to talk about you when you are not in the room? Or when you leave this earth, how do you hope people remember you? What are the things, the character traits that are non-negotiable for you that inform how you want to live your life? What a better way to have those articulated and be able to constantly reference them. That's one of the best ways that you can have to just keep rooting back into your authentic self, especially when you lose your way. So, your values. That's mindset shift number one. Mindset shift number two. The old playbook would tell us that our opinion, our perspective, our truth varies in its value based on who's in the room. And so what I mean by this is that there are some rooms where you feel you have the title or you're a manager or whatnot, and you feel open to speak your truth. But then there are other rooms you go into where there are people who are of higher, quote, status than you or higher on the hierarchy. And so you withhold your truth and you feel as though it's not as valuable as other people in the room. The new playbook is honoring your truth regardless of the room that you are in. And this is a very hard one as well, especially for, again, women. We've been trained to be docile and sweet and not make other people uncomfortable and to be quiet. And speaking and offering your truth and believing that your truth is as valuable as everyone else, regardless of their title, is hard. And it is a key element of authentic leadership, is speaking your truth and honoring who you are and the unique gift that your specific perspective brings to the room. And when I'm talking about this, I often think about where I'm going full pep talk here, people. So like, buckle up. When I talk about this, I often think about how miraculous each individual human is. Yes, there are nearly 8 billion of us, but the odds that you exist as a human being are staggering. Like when you think about all of the planets that exist and the fact that we like kind of still haven't really found life anywhere else, that the conditions exist that support life here on Earth and that they have become human beings, then of all of the hundreds of thousands of years that we have existed as a species, that your ancestors, that some people survived everything that they went through, diseases and war and all the things, so that there's this lineage that your ancestors all of a sudden came up and all of a sudden there's the human beings who created you, and that you were born in this moment in time is a miracle. And then you are the only you that will ever exist. You are the only person who is exactly like you, who has had the experiences, the education, all of the things that have happened to you, and the generational trauma and the generational wisdom that has been handed down. All of those things packaged together give you a unique perspective in your brain that no other human being alive has. And so when I invite you to offer your truth, it is coming from that inner place of knowing that what you have to say is valuable, regardless of your title, regardless of your age, regardless of any sort of identifier. Your truth is as valuable as any other person in the room. And this is hard, yes, especially when you're in rigid hierarchical command and control organizational cultures where like anyone who is not the CEO is essentially just like supposed to sit there and not really open their mouth unless they're called upon. And it is possible to begin stepping into this and practicing speaking your truth. One of the most authentic leaders that I have ever had the gift of knowing, Alfa Demmellash. She's the co-founder and CEO of Rising Tide Capital. And when I was speaking to her, she offered just this little nugget of gold when she was talking about how she regularly comes back to honoring her truth. And it is the very simple question, what is uniquely mine to say right now? She said before she walks into big meetings or if and she's in a room where she's feeling uncomfortable, she goes back to that. What is uniquely mine to say right now? Not, what do I think other people want me to say? No, what is uniquely mine to say right now? And that roots back into that place of just this inner knowing of who you are and offering your perspective, your gift to the room and believing that it is genuinely as valuable as everyone else's. We had a big gig last year in New York. And listen, like I live in Boulder, Colorado girl, like going into Manhattan, sometimes I can feel a little underdressed because I live in athleisure. I'm not like a fashion person. And we were going into a fashion company. And I was like totally second guessing myself the night before. I'm like trying on all my outfits and I'm freaking out. And in Jocelyn's hotel room, and she just takes me and she goes, Megan, take a deep breath. I'm like, yep. She goes, Meg, do we change who we are based on the room that we're walking into? I was like, yes. No, we don't. We don't, Jocelyn. We don't. And so I didn't. And it is just this constant coming back to and returning to believing that your truth and what you bring to the table is as valuable as everyone else in the room, regardless of who is in that room. And then we have number 3. So our old playbook way of doing things tells us that you do not question the norm. You do not question the status quo because people have come before us who have set that there for a reason. And if I'm going to succeed, I'm going to play by the rule book and never question what is happening around me. The new playbook invites you to regularly question the status quo, especially in times when it goes in contradiction to your values or your truth is in fact telling you to speak something else. So instead of talking through this one, I'm just going to give one of my favorite CEOs in the country, Melanie Dulbecco. This is her story of questioning the norm.
We've always worked with different compensation agencies to make sure that our compensation structure is solid and competitive. But it struck me about 3 years ago when we were doing some work that we're all looking at each other and it's getting more of the same. And there's this widening income inequality and wealth inequality that are happening in the United States and other parts of the world, but it's getting pretty extreme in the US compared to what it is. So I went to UC Berkeley undergrad, and I really love a group there that I follow and support called the Opportunity Lab, and they do research on income inequality. So I've gotten to know some of the professors doing the research and attend events where they're presenting their research. And I thought, they're looking to government to do something about that, but we can do something about this in business. Like, we don't have to wait for a government program. So how do we think about compensation differently? Well, I'm sure you know about MIT's living wage calculator, and that's a really good reference for us. So we benchmark living wage. And when we did this, this project with the comp agency, they came back to us and said, well, you are paying above market for your frontline hourly team members. You don't need to do anything there. In fact, you might have room to pay less if that's what you're interested in. I know you're not going to want to do that, but you can leave that where it is. Oh, where you need to pay more is your executives. And we said, well, what if we think market is immoral? What if we think that, we're a B corporation and we want to really think about how we create more opportunities for hourly people? They haven't had often the same opportunities as the rest of us for education or exposure to other things. How do we align our B Corp heart, our core values, our development values with the compensation structure? And they said, well, all compensation agencies look at market. So what you're saying is something different than market. So you should establish your own compensation philosophies. And then whenever you work with a compensation agency, say, here are our philosophies and how we will apply them relative to market. So we said, could you help us with that? What would a compensation philosophy look like? And they helped us. They gave us an outline that we could then work with. So they said, all right, look at it by level, by executive, manager, or individual contributor, and hourly. And then look at it in category of base pay, incentive pay, long-term incentive. And then what we realized is, okay, with hourly people, we will pay above market. We will benchmark living wage. So our goal is to quickly get people to living wage and beyond with transferable skills. So I can say about what that means. We also said we're going to pay above market in incentive pay. Most hourly people don't get bonuses. We give bonuses. Everybody in the company gets a bonus based on revenue growth and bottom line profitability. And everyone builds some financial literacy around that because we share those numbers with people in our quarterly meetings and keep track of it together. And everyone gets excited. And then in long-term incentives, everyone in the company gets to participate in our profit sharing plan, which we've had in place for a long time. So everyone's automatically enrolled in profit sharing. We have a 401k plan. If you contribute to it, we match funds, but we also created an ESOP. So when we had the opportunity, we mustered the resources to buy 10% of the company to put into the employee stock ownership plan. And now we talk about how we build the value in the company, and then people get their annual statements. And everyone in the company then becomes also an owner in the creation of that wealth. So now we have this compensation philosophy that looks at these things, and now we can say, all right, we're going to pay above market in all three categories for hourly folks. For managers and individual contributors, we're going to be competitive. We're going to pay at least at market, but we're going to have better benefits and incentives. And then for executives, we might pay a little below market, because what we're focused on is a relationship with these other levels. So that's kind of how we sorted out compensation philosophy. And it felt really good to have then a tool to work with when we're looking at those kinds of things.
As Melanie's story shows us, by questioning the norm regularly, especially when it doesn't feel right, it helps you unlock new ways of thinking, new ideas, helps you root into innovation and finding solutions and setting yourself apart from the status quo. And Melanie's company, because she does things like this, she's the CEO of Tarani Syrups. And for the last 34 years with her at the helm, they have grown more than 20% year over year for more than 30 years in a row. That is staggering amounts of business growth. And so much of it comes down to the fact that she does not accept the status quo as the way that she is supposed to do things. She looks at the status quo, whatever playbook she's given, she takes it into consideration, and then she questions it from a place of curiosity of, is this the right way to do it? Instead of just immediately accepting something because it's the way it's always been done. She's one of the most authentic leaders I have ever met, and the proof is in the pudding, or the proof is in the syrup. Sorry for the bad joke, guys. It's a more effective way to lead. That's all I'm going to say on it. So, recapping here, looking at leading from your values and looking to your values to inform your behavior instead of looking to other people to inform your behavior. Honoring your truth, remembering that it's a gift, and valuing it just as much as anyone else, regardless of who's in the room, and regularly questioning the norm and just constantly being in a place of curiosity, of wondering if it is in fact the best way to do things. These 3 practices will help you on your journey toward becoming a more authentic leader, which, as mentioned, better for you, better for the people around you, and just kind of better for the business community at large. The more of us that step in to our wholeness and bring our entire selves to the workplace, not only are you inspiring yourself and feeling good about yourself, you're inspiring others around you and giving them permission to do the same. And the more and more and more of us that do this, the better the workplace becomes. So that's all for today. Thanks so much. Thanks again for listening to Better Than This. As a reminder, you can always find show notes and any corresponding resources for the show on the show's website at meganfrenchdunbar.com/betterthanthis. And if today's episode resonated with you, I would be very grateful if you could leave a review or a rating on whichever podcast platform you're listening to the show on, or share the episode with a friend who you think would appreciate it. You can also subscribe to my Stack for weekly insights and tools to support your growth along the way. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo so we can, wait for it, build something better than this. Take care.